Hi, good day, everyone. My name is Alex. Thank you so much for attending our webinar today, specifically focusing on the Teltonika products. So just as a quick intro to myself, I am Leader's National Trainer, also a Teltonika user and a massive fanboy as well of the brand. I've used their products extensively over the last couple of years and really dig it. So it's awesome to be presenting their content today. So today's session is only 30 minutes long. It's a very quick little webinar. Questions are encouraged and most welcome. Please do feel free to post them through as we progress through the training. You guys are more than welcome to ask any questions, even if they're very left of field. And we'll be answering all the questions during the course of the training and at the end. So thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to actually attend. We know it's an extremely busy time of year, so really appreciate you attending today. So with that, we'll take a quick look at where Teltonika came from and how they got started. It's only one slide, so really briefly. They've been around for about 21 years at this point, so they're not a new company by any measure. They are also a global brand with presence in more than 150 countries all over the world. So they have more than 900 employees in 17 offices in 11 countries. And most importantly, the number of devices adopted, Teltonika devices specifically, globally is more than 9 million. So it's an incredibly popular solution, incredibly popular brand. And within Leader as well, we see how well the brand's progressing, and it's a phenomenal product. So that's the only part that we're going to talk about the company. The rest of it, we're going to look at the products and the solutions. So with that, we can take a dive into the different devices that they offer. So the first thing to note here is that all of their devices are designed for a specific purpose. It's not like some of the other brands where you get a million different flavors of essentially the same thing. It's designed specifically with a use case in mind. So first thing we're going to look at here is the TRB range. All these products are, again, of course, available on Leader's dealership, so you guys are welcome to check out anything that sparks your interest as well. In the TRB range, at their core, they're essentially small little industrial LTE gateways running on Linux environments, and they offer a fairly good degree of customization options as well. They're primarily designed for IoT use cases. Specifically, the TRB range is very much focused towards IoT. Within the TRB range, there are 4 main flavors, and it's very easy to define where each one of them would fit in. The first one we'll look at here is the TRB 140. It's a very basic gateway, and essentially the idea behind this is to have a device that does both LTE and gigabit Ethernet. So from the gigabit Ethernet, you can obviously break out to a myriad of different devices. So you can go to either another switch, or you can go to directly to a device, for example, a PC or something like that as well, depending on what you want to connect. The rest of the TRB range is really designed to interface with more legacy systems. So the TRB 141, for example, has multiple input, multiple output. So it has input output support. And again, the interface is to allow you to have LTE connectivity to something that is using IO, and that would typically not traditionally support LTE connectivity. Similarly, the TRB 142 and 145, again, it's an LTE interface to 2 different types of interfaces. So the TRB 142 specifically focused on connectivity to RS-232 devices, and the TRB 145 meant to be interfacing with RS-485 as well. So the benefit here is that these devices are lower in cost due to only including the number of interfaces for a specific use case. So a lot of the times what we'll see is environments where legacy devices don't support LTE, but you do need a way to monitor and manage them remotely or provide connectivity of some sorts. And through these interfaces, it essentially makes it nice and easy for us to manage and control these devices. Typically, this is older equipment, industrial machines, etc. And that's really what these are designed to be used with. Going on from there, we can take a look at where they've been deployed successfully. So for example, We can look at energy solutions, smart monitoring solutions. So, for example, smart meters, etc. Industrial automation solutions, power automation, renewable energy. Really, anything that you can think of that has one of those RS485 or 232 or I/O interfaces can be monitored, managed, and essentially triggered remotely as well. We often see use cases where there's a very specific requirement to interact with something that's legacy, but it's irreplaceable. So, for example, in mining environments and on farms and places like that, where there's been a significant investment in infrastructure, but because of the time at which those deployments happened, they are now older and they don't have support for modern interfaces. Teltonika kind of bridges that gap and provides remote connectivity and even monitoring capabilities to those devices as well. And then going on to the RUT series, the Rut series as we call it. These are by far some of the most popular devices that are used, and they're some of the most widely used industrial router solutions globally. They are pretty significant in terms of the IoT space. And unlike the TRB range, the Rut range is designed to be more of an all-in-one solution. So through this, we have basically a router with LTE and Wi-Fi connectivity that also includes a number of different interfaces. So these would obviously be more expensive than the TRB range, but they are still very well priced. With the RUT range, you also have more routing capabilities and support for stuff like VoIP, VPN functionality, TR069 support, and a whole bunch more. We also get support for WAN to LTE failover, which means they are awesome solutions where mission critical internet connectivity, for example, is a requirement. The main difference between the models here is the port configurations. And for example, GPS support on the RUT 955. And we can also call them, or we also do call them industrial solutions. So let's take a look at why we would indicate that. So depending on the model that you go for, they have a fairly wide operating temperature support, going from all the way down from minus 40 degrees Celsius all the way up to plus 70 degrees Celsius. So they're extremely reliable, rugged, and meant to be used in places where it's going to be moved around, it's going to be susceptible to varying temperatures and industrial use cases, essentially. We also see a lot of use cases in mobility, where tons of these devices are getting deployed into. So looking at where these devices are used, first and most popular tends to be as LTE backup for WAN connectivity. Virtually all of your customers will typically want a backup solution in case the internet goes down. So Teltonika really is the perfect solution for this, as it's a low-cost device that can easily do this. And it's easy to set up as well. We've also seen these devices get used in places like public transport, providing connectivity to, for example, passengers. We've seen ATM machines. We've seen gaming machines, etc., or even vending machines get hooked up to them in order to be managed and monitored remotely. Again, the support for legacy interfaces here means that you can do much more than just provide internet to these devices. As a quick example of my own somewhat silly use case for a RUT 240, I took it along with me going camping, and because they support such a wide voltage input rating, I could connect it up to either my Ute battery or my solar kit for my camping setup. In this case, I created a little bush wisp, and with the strong antennas on the RUT 240 that I use, I could pick up the LTE where no one else around me could. I created essentially a small captive portal through the use of a third-party captive portal, and I sold the Wi-Fi to my camping neighbors, and more specifically their kids, who, who were at that point so starved for entertainment. It was a pretty easy sell. So it was peace and quiet for the parents. That they paid my camping trip, and the kids got a lot more quiet from there as well. So it's pretty much a win all around. So I'll note that putting a router in a tree is not recommended solution. It just happened to be where I could get the best LTE connectivity in the spot. But just as a silly use case for these devices and to show how flexible they really are in terms of where you can deploy them. So let's take a look at the Rutx range or the Rutx range. In a nutshell, they are highly secure and reliable OpenWRT-based routers. OpenWRT being a darling of the industry, of course. Many people using OpenWRT for its flexibility and customization options. They are very similar to the RUT range, but there's an even bigger emphasis on more advanced networking functionality. So most of these also include support for different VPN services, for example, including stuff like OpenVPN, IPsec, or even L2TP. In addition to that, most of them also support basic firewall functionality as well. So some of the standout features here, for example, is the dual SIM support on both the RUTX 11 and the RUTX 9. As well as Bluetooth connectivity on the RUX 10, my abbreviations are getting the best of me, my RUTX 10 and 11 as well. So you might have a question around what Bluetooth connectivity would be used for, and we'll talk about that in a second. Another standout product here is the RUTX 12. It features 2 SIM slots, LTE Cat6 capabilities, and most importantly, it supports bonding to combine multiple internet sources into one essentially. And then through this device, we also get failover as well. And as you'll see, the speeds there is significant, especially when bonding is enabled up to 600 megabits per second, which is very significant for LTE speeds. Through 5G, for example, we can exceed this, but to have this functionality on 4G capabilities, 4G, of course, stretches a lot further. It's more widely available, so that is a significant speed to see on LTE. And perhaps the ultimate device in the RUTX range is the Rutx R1. It also features 2 SIM cards, 5 gigabit Ethernet ports, dual band Wi-Fi, and importantly, an SFP port. So the SFP port here is critical as it speaks to the use case of this device. It's primarily meant to be used for WAN failover capabilities within a business. And the most important thing as well is it's rack mountable. So through this device, you can link it back into your business as a top of rack or into your top of rack switches for maximum throughput. So it's an awesome connectivity option or redundancy option that you can present to your customers, again, at a fairly economical price. So in the use cases that we can look at for these products, so very much focused on industrial CCTV applications, wireless offices, for example, where everything is, nothing's wired in, but you're instead using wireless connectivity. Smart city applications, if any of you have use cases like that, and then high-speed mobility as well. So tons of different use cases, and depending on the device, a lot of them support GPS as well. So you can even do tracking through them. So we talked about the Bluetooth a second ago. So Teltonika also have a few sensors out there. One of these is a little puck ID, which uses the Bluetooth Low Energy or Bluetooth LE for object tracking. So this is really designed for places where GPS tracking is not available, stuff like warehouses, places like that. And essentially it can be mounted in a multitude of different ways, and it's designed to track objects within relative close proximity. They also have more, they have a more slimline version of this device called the Blue Slim ID, which functions in much the same way, but just as a smaller form factor device. So the battery life on these the two devices that we've just talked about, so the Puck ID is 5 years and the Slim ID is 2 years respectively. Again, those are estimations, but roughly what you should be able to get out of them. So it's significant. It means you can use them for an extended period of time. So they also have a little sensor called the Blue Puck Mag. As the name implies, it's essentially a magnetic contact sensor, and it can be used to monitor either for open or closed statuses on doors or stuff like windows or really any point of entry. Of course, all of this is fine and well to see the product and we see their various use cases. Again, Teltonika have a very streamlined product line, so they don't have a million different flavors. It's very much geared towards specific use cases. We've looked at the devices, but now we can also take a look at how we're actually going to manage them. The first and most obvious way that we would manage a device is through the device's web interface. I think this is the way most of us would be accustomed to managing devices. Um, I've used these devices extensively, and I can honestly say that the interfaces are some of the easiest to use out there. The interfaces are extremely easy to navigate. Anyone with even a basic knowledge of routing should be able to get their way through this interface quite easily and to get it up and running within a few minutes. So managing the devices through the web interface, um, it really only works if you have a handful of them. What happens if you have hundreds or even thousands of them across multiple customers and they may be even geographically distant from each other? Well, that's really where Teltonica's RMS platform comes into play. So RMS is abbreviation for Remote Management System, and essentially it's an extremely powerful tool that allows you to remotely manage your devices and adopt them and get information about those devices in real time. The licensing model on this is extremely easy, and we'll discuss that in a second as well. So let's take a look at what the RMS can do. So firstly, control, as we would think. We need to be able to remotely access devices, control those devices and manage them, and then apply changes on the fly. That's at the core of what the RMS does, and of course it does it very well. As I said, we can quickly and easily see how our devices are performing in the wild as well, thanks in part to its statistics display, and we can monitor the health of those devices to take preventative measures in case something goes wrong. And a lot of times what we'll see is people taking action before the end customer is even aware that there is a problem. The RMS also allows us to use configuration templates. That's quite important if you're applying changes in bulk. It makes it really super easy, so you don't have to go into each one of those devices and make adjustments individually. The RMS basically removes the need to have a public IP address at each site as well in order to manage the devices. Again, that makes things super easy for you to manage and deploy. And knowing the pain of getting access to public IP addresses, etc., that's a really good value add. We can also even do firmware updates in bulk as well, which we can use to also make sure that our devices are staying up to date with the latest connectivity, or sorry, latest security, I mean, which is extremely important on a device that is providing connectivity for our business and is internet facing. So really, really capable devices, and the RMS really takes that a step beyond. So really, that's just a very tiny part of what it can do, the RMS can do. And I'm highly encouraging all of you to take a look at the RMS for yourself. Teltonika does have a 30-day free trial available on the website. And I can hear you asking already, well, how does the licensing work? So let's take a look at that quickly. So Leader sells the licenses, and essentially it's sold per month on a prepaid basis. So the licenses are available on Leader's normal dealer shop as well. And you can simply search for Teltonika RMS in order to find them. So once those licenses are purchased, they can be pooled and essentially applied to the devices you wish to manage. If a device does not need to be managed, they're still visible in the RMS in the portal, and you can choose to assign or deassign those licenses as you wish. Again, it's very simple. The licenses are sold on a per month basis, but you can prepay for example, a 12-month or 24-month period as you're buying the device to know that you're going to have remote management capabilities as it goes down the line. Whenever it comes to remote management capabilities, I always encourage resellers to look at the MSP model through offering services on an ongoing basis. For example, remotely monitoring and managing this thing. You can obviously charge a monthly fee for that as well and pass on some of that cost that we see for the license charge or the remote management services. We can pass that cost onto the customer. It means you're more sticky with the customer. You're constantly interacting with them to get them a monthly invoice, or if you wish, you can obviously have them prepay for a 12-month period in advance or something like that. The managed services model makes things really easy and makes your revenue really easy to track and to see how it's growing as well. So let's take a quick look at a couple more places where we generally see these devices getting deployed into. Construction sites is one of those places, and they can be quite complex and hard to monitor effectively, as the solution tends to need to be portable and needs to be flexible as well. In other words, it needs to be flexible how you deploy it. Typically, the job site changes every few days and can be quite hard to get reliable connectivity. In the example we have here, we can connect up to, for example, we can have a IP camera connect up to the NVR, and from the NVR we use the Teltonika devices to enable remote offsite monitoring, for example. And you can even do remote offsite management of that solution as well. So we can see as the job site's going up through various security cameras what is happening. So you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can either have a team sitting in the CCTV control room monitoring this remotely, or you can even have someone on the local Wi-Fi that needs to see what's happening on the other side of the job site. Just jump onto the Wi-Fi and quickly do remote monitoring that way. Digital signage is another one of those types of deployments which can be very hard to get right, as often the signage is in a public-facing space and internet might not always be available. So in this example that we have here, we can use, for example, a little leader NUC to present the content, which then gets connected to the likes of a TRB140 that just provides basic internet gateway functionality, for example. And that allows you to remotely monitor the signage, update the signage, and change it to whatever you need to do. And of course, the odd Windows updates or something like that can be done as well. In the next example we're looking at, it's ATMs. So I can hear you saying already, ATMs tend to be in places where internet connectivity is pretty much available. However, the most important thing for ATMs is not really connectivity, but reliability. So, for example, most of your ATMs will have some sort of CCTV solution built into it, and having access to that feed is extremely important. So the RUT 950 or even the Rutx R1 is ideal for this, as it can provide failover options to make sure internet's available, even if the primary WAN interface fails. And we see a lot of this style of use case where these devices get deployed just in case the WAN connectivity goes down. And that does happen quite frequently. In transportation solutions, we can also take a look at how Teltonika integrates into a transportation solution and how the various systems are interconnected within transportation solutions today. So a typical example that we have here is a bus. Buses include cameras, digital signage of some sort. We have to track tickets. They typically have payment system solutions, and some of them even have panic buttons. So through the RUT 955 or even the Rutx 11, we can use the built-in Ethernet capabilities to connect up all those different components because it has a little Ethernet switch built into it. And then the LTE connectivity can link all of that up to external portals or external services. Inside the bus, we're also often presented with infotainment systems, which can also be used with the RUT devices. So the built-in Wi-Fi can even be used to do Wi-Fi connectivity in the bus as it's on the go. And it doesn't just have to be regional buses, it can be long-range buses as well, as an example. And again, it doesn't have to be a bus. It can be industrial machinery or trucks or something like that. Some of the Teltonika devices also feature built-in GPS, so you can track those devices through their movement as well. Really, that's it. It's just a very quick, brief overview of the Teltonika product range. So we're now going to do the Q&A session. Along with me today, I've got Chris Sutherland, who is the product manager for Teltonika within Leader, who is going to be assisting me to answer the questions that you guys might have. So if you have any questions, please feel free to post them through now. Alternatively, we'll end off the session there. No questions? Okay, perfect. So if you do have any questions that do come up after this webinar, please do feel free to reach out to your Leader account manager who will happily assist. Alternatively, you can reach out to either myself or Chris Sutherland as well. I just had a quick question come through. What solutions do you have for GPS? So Chris, keep me honest here, please. Which one of the Teltonika devices support GPS tracking?
So the RUTX series, some of the upper level models like the RUTX 11 and 12 have got GPS built in, as well as the RUT 955. Now those devices, it's not really for vehicle tracking particularly, but through the RMS portal you can see where they are, and that you could do some ring fencing options and that kind of thing, but it's not for live tracking. You won't be able to see, update, within 15 seconds where the vehicle is, where it's been, how long it's stopped at an area. That's a totally different solution. That's Teltonica's totally separate vehicle management system, which we'll happily do another webinar on if you guys like it. But the networking products, although they do have GPS, it's really designed for sort of ring fencing. So if you think of Teltonika being placed in an ATM machine as an example, you can set a rule that if that ATM machine goes outside of a 20-meter range, in other words, if somebody stuck it on the back of a ute and is trying to drive away with the thing, trigger an alert, get the police involved, that kind of scenario. So all of those units that I mentioned do support it.
And then we have a question here from John asking if the recording will be available. Yes, so the recording will be sent out to everyone automatically as soon as the webinar concludes. And then there's a question here, how do they handle WAN failover? Is it put in some bridge mode or must it also do routing? Again, Chris, that might be a good question for you.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So in bridged mode, there's no failover option. So bridge mode literally just turns off all of the routing, all of the NAT, and all of the firewall functionality, and it just takes whatever the SIM card is doing and thumps it straight through to the LAN port. So if you've got a device in bridge mode, it has to be connected to another router or another firewall, like a WatchGuard or something like that, and that will handle the failover. If the Teltonika itself is handling the failover, no bridge mode, it's obviously all the routing is built in there. You can set different monitors and different alerts. So if you've got NBN as the primary line, as an example, you can obviously detect when that line physically goes down. It'll fail over to SIM card A. If that doesn't have enough data, it'll go to SIM card B, that kind of thing. So it's normal failover. You can also go a little bit further and you can start monitoring things like latency. So maybe the line is up, but perhaps your latency is all over the place. You're getting pings of 200, 300 milliseconds because something's not quite right. So most routers wouldn't detect that as a failover because the internet is technically still there. Whereas with the Teltonika, you can teach it, listen, anything over 100 milliseconds, something's not right. Failover to one of my SIM card or something like that. So there's a couple of different options, and it's very much tweakable by you.
Another question there from David. Any restrictions on SIM provider?
Nope, not at all. So they're fully backwards compatible with all of the SIM providers in Australia. So we've got very happy customers using them on Telstra, Optus, Vodafone. They all work quite happily. And Teltonika has actually gone one step further and provided a couple of profiles built into the routers. So when you slap the SIM card in there, it'll do its best to choose the one for you. But you can actually choose whether you've got a Telstra or an Optus, and it'll provide the correct ATMs and that sort of thing as best it possibly can.
Awesome. I think that seems to be all of it. Great. Like I said, if you guys have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to your account manager or either myself or Chris. And with that, we are going to finish off the webinar. Thank you so much again for attending today. We really appreciate your time. Hope everyone has a wonderful week. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye.